Dan Held, thanks so much for joining us on Wall Street Unplugged.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start with Kraken, right? Because this is, I read on your site that you're part of the original 2013 crypto meetup group. I'm quoting you here in San Francisco, which is comprised of the founders Kraken, Coinbase, Litecoin, and others, 2013. I guess in your wildest dreams, do you think Bitcoin, the crypto market, Kraken would be where they are today, or how big this market has grown?
It was certainly a wild dream. Let's put it that way. I didn't, back in that day, it was a small group of us. I mean, tiny. There wasn't much money in the space. There hadn't been many investments. There certainly wasn't any sort of validation by the mainstream world. We were considered to be kind of lunatics. We were like a small group of weirdos that believed in this Bitcoin thing. So yeah, I mean, my hypothesis was that Bitcoin would be widely regarded as gold 2.0 someday, and it has. And I think, it took immense fortitude to stick with it all these years, because you got your friends, family, coworkers, lovers telling you that you're wrong. It's a lot to go through. But yeah, I am incredibly impressed with how far Bitcoin's come. Bitcoin has survived so much conflict and turmoil, including like a civil war. I'm not sure if your audience knows about that, but that's kind of a little known fact, I think, in the mainstream world, that Bitcoin even survived a civil war within its own ranks. So Bitcoin, the fact that it survived this long, I think, is just testament to how decentralized and resilient it is.
Now, you have a lot of experience here where, you're for a company, Interchange, that's what you sold to Kraken. And prior to that, you had Uber, created early crypto products like a Change Tip acquired by Airbnb, Zero Block acquired by blockchain.com. So I would imagine that during all these projects, which just seemed like every one of them was successful, that people have told you were crazy along the line, right?
Yeah. And, look, certainly these aren't all exits where I'm making like $10 million or something. Some of these are more acqui-hire exits. But yeah, I mean, with every, I've got a tremendous respect for inventors and founders, where when you begin something, if you want to make a lot of money, you have to build something that no one else is thinking about, or like no one else believes will work. So inherently you are short everyone else. and so it takes a lot of just mental strength to persevere through that. Any invention, whether it be Uber, Bitcoin, the telephone, light bulbs, everyone at the time, their immediate response is, I'm afraid of this. I'm scared of this. I don't believe it's going to make change happen. One of my favorite Twitter accounts is called the Pessimist Archive. And the Pessimist Archive goes back to like 1880. And they go find newspaper clippings around different topics, like the bicycle or the light bulb. And they write about how people were afraid of it at first, where they're like, the bicycle is going to distort our brains because we're going too fast. For women, it's going to hurt their posture, and it's going to make them deformed. Ridiculous ideas. I mean, the bicycle is such a ridiculous thing to criticize. But yeah, with any new technology, humans, again, we're not exactly like, we have evolved into we have come into civilization very, very recently in our evolutionary timeline. And when we encounter something new, we act like an animal would. We are scared of it, afraid of it. We're like, I don't trust this. I don't get it. We don't give it a rational, kind of cold, rational perspective when we first approach something. So Bitcoin, like any other new technology, had this, heavy skepticism in the beginning, but over the last 10 years, it's overcome a lot of that, especially in the last 6 months.
I was going to ask you, because you are a massive fan of Bitcoin, where a lot of people might say you're a fan of crypto. But from what I read, and I may be wrong on this, and sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it seems like there's a lot of tokens out there. I won't call them shit tokens, but just a lot of things that don't work. But you really love Bitcoin, and I guess you kind of answer that. But I'd love for you to go more into it, because people look at Bitcoin in so many different ways. I mean, they see it as a store of value, an alternative currency. Has your view changed on it from 2013 to today, where I would think that it's becoming an alternative currency where you could use it in more and more and more stuff? You see PayPal and everybody else coming out. But I'm just wondering if any of that has changed, or just still like, hey, this is a better alternative of keeping your money as a store of value than putting in a gold.
Yeah. So I like to think about, when a product or protocol solves a problem, ultimately every product or service or protocol solves a problem for its customers, which is us humans. When it does that, it is tackling something that we call a TAM, total addressable market. So how big is the problem that it's solving? Store of value or storing value is the largest TAM of any product, service, or protocol in the world. So let's give it some scope here. Gold is worth $10 trillion.
Mhm.
Negatively yielding sovereign debt is around $18 trillion. And you've got fiat cash and all the dollars in M1, M2, and all the fiat money in the system, and that's in the tens of trillions. And then you have real estate, which is in the hundreds of trillions. And if you look at New York, San Francisco, where I live, London, a lot of real estate is used as a store of value. There are a bunch
Yeah.
of empty apartments and empty homes for the wealthy to park their money. Bitcoin competes with all of these, and also I should have thrown in offshore banking. Bitcoin competes with all of these as like a private Swiss bank account that you can access on your phone. This is incredibly powerful and changes the dynamic of governments and how they control money. So Bitcoin is tackling that. Now, other people thought Bitcoin might also be useful for these other things. But Bitcoin doesn't need to have any other utility other than being a store of value at this current stage in its evolution as a new money. New money doesn't come into existence very often, and this new money had to first go through the store of value era, the most lucrative, highest TAM era, before it can get into the one that we commonly refer to as a currency, the medium of exchange unit of account era. I go to the grocery store and there's dollar signs on that's the unit of account. There's dollar signs on my groceries. And the medium of exchange is the common everyday payment method that I use to pay for things. A lot of people think Bitcoin has failed because it's not used as an everyday payment method, but that comes much later after Bitcoin goes through the store of value era where people believe in it and store value in it. A kind of funny story with, not story with this, but a kind of a funny analogy or kind of a word of wisdom is I live in the quintessential gold rush city of San Francisco. There's not one store in the entire city of San Francisco where you can pay for things in gold, but gold is still worth $10 trillion. It doesn't make gold worth any less. So store of value is what Bitcoin is primarily useful for at the moment. Just because if you can't use it to buy groceries or anything else, that's not a big deal. That comes much later, like a decade or two from now.
Now, I notice, again, for someone who's been in this industry for such a long time, but now you're seeing more institutional adoption, and you're seeing guys like Ray Dalio, Michael Saylor, who get tons of attention, who get the headlines. Because for me, in order for this to get as big, you had to see Wall Street kind of merge with crypto, and that wasn't that easy because I think that those two groups don't like each other very much. But yeah, I wanted to get more into that because it seems like you're seeing that integration, you're seeing Wall Street, seeing more adoption. But when I see people like Ray Dalio and Michael Saylor who are speaking at Texas A&M this week, talk about, I think it's a Bitcoin as an asset conference class. I think it's in your Twitter account. Those names are getting promoted, yet you have been one of the earliest adopters, one of the smartest guys in this industry, and you're actually speaking at Texas A&M as well, ahead of these guys, but they don't seem to mention you that much, but these guys are getting all the headlines. I mean, does that still bother you? Because, again, it's great to see those guys coming in, but they should be listening to you, right?
I mean, look, I'm well known in crypto, but I'm not well known outside of crypto. Versus these are legendary CEOs or legendary hedge fund managers. So no, I don't take it offensively. I'm pretty early in my career, so we'll see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years. But if I'm right and I stick around, I think there's a very good chance that my audience, right now I'm at 170,000 Twitter followers, and I'm getting 30,000 Twitter followers a month. So very good chance that in the future it's pretty weird to see my call turn out correct after 8 years. It's seeing all these institutions validate that I was right almost feels wrong because I'm like, for such a long time they were on the other side of the table telling me that I'm wrong, and now that they're coming over here, I'm like, oh wow, it's actually happening. It's I wasn't crazy. I was right. And I mean, if I am right about Bitcoin fundamentally changes everything about money. It changes the relationship of governments controlling their money. And this undermines everything. It undermines their control over the population. It undermines control over taxes and control over spending. I don't think people really understand, at the deepest libertarian level, like what this means for humankind. I think Bitcoin is one of the greatest tools for freedom. It's like the separation of church and state. We need the separation of money and state. There's the U.S. the government formally didn't control money. In fact, a lot of the founding fathers were very against the idea of a central bank. So I view Bitcoin as kind of a check and balance to state power or government power.
No, that's great. I love the way you put that. So I want to transition here because I can keep going on Bitcoin. I really love the way you put state and money. But let's get into Kraken, right? Because right now it says you're the growth lead at Kraken. Kraken is a very large exchange. Why don't you give us some of the things at Kraken? Maybe if for people who aren't familiar with that platform, some of them are. We have our own crypto products here that we sell in financial newsletters. But talk about what the growth lead means and maybe a little bit about Kraken because it is exciting what you guys are building over there as well.
Yeah, great question. So I work at Kraken. Kraken is the one of the oldest and largest crypto exchanges in the space. It's founded by Jesse Powell, really, really early OG. He got really involved early, like 2010, 2011. And, I think that Kraken, it's especially, I think, right now as Coinbase is about to IPO tomorrow, Coinbase is probably our number one competitor that we look to because we operate in a lot of the same markets in the US and Europe. Those are our two biggest markets. And in the US, Coinbase is currently number one. And in Europe, we're typically number one. And that I mean that in terms of like US dollar to crypto volume. So dollar to Bitcoin, dollar to Ethereum, and same with Ethereum to dollars. And then if we look at Europe, it's euro to Bitcoin, euro to Ethereum. And so when we look at those trading pairs, that's how we kind of evaluate competitive performance. So we are very excited for our, I think in tech, there's a lot of, even a lot of camaraderie, even with competitor companies. We all want to win, but a rising tide raises all ships. And I think Coinbase's IPO tomorrow is definitely going to be a great shining light onto the space of like, hey, this is a real asset class. These companies are making real money, and these are legitimate, companies making real money versus crypto before was kind of considered a little bit, kind of like a little bit niche. Now, with for Kraken, we're looking at this and we're looking at our user numbers, and crypto just reached a $2 trillion market cap. Like this is not something to be ignored, and I think that's really, really cool. And when we look at Q1 2021, most of our metrics beat all of 2020 in one quarter.
Yep.
This is the sort of growth that crypto companies experience in these bull runs. And, I just think it's so exciting to see us, really, really start to dig in there. And, I'm trying to figure out what sort of exact metrics, that I can say, but yeah, let's see.
I think that's good enough. I think a lot of people are trading on your site that listen to this, but yeah, but for just one of the largest exchanges, because obviously I wanted to compare it to the Coinbase IPO, which is going to be valued at 100 billion. And we're doing this Tuesday. This is going to be published on Wednesday. But and that's what I want to talk about. How it has to be great for you guys. I know you saw it is a competitor, but yet it's just such a small industry still compared to how big it can get. I would think this is fantastic for you. You're seeing Binance, even though that token's not tied, the BNB token's not tied to at an equity stake, but you're seeing that thing go up tremendously, especially over the past few weeks and past few months actually. But I would think that has to be great for great companies like yourself, because like you said, it's the oldest exchange, but you guys are also one of the biggest in the world.
Totally. Yeah. We, all of these trading volumes are public information. So you can go to cryptowatch.com or CryptoWatch. It's a Kraken product where we display real-time market data and volumes for all the exchanges and assets in the space. So if you go on there, you can filter by exchanges by volume, and yeah, you can check out our volume and Kraken's Coinbase's volume and Binance and all the other all the other exchanges in the space. And these numbers are huge. These numbers are very, very large. So yeah, I think that it's just so exciting to see these institutions come in, give validation to Bitcoin, which therefore I think brings in more retail. And a lot of Bitcoiners don't understand that a lot of retail is waiting in the wings until institutions tell them that this is legitimate. And so this will, I think, ultimately spur a reflexive loop, in this bull run where we could see things get really, really hot. And yeah, I think for Kraken, it just, as a company, it's a thrilling spot to be in. I was growth at Uber, so working at Uber headquarters on growth product and growth marketing, seeing us go from, tens of millions of customers to hundreds of millions. And, with Kraken, we're at a little bit earlier era, but it feels the same. That energy, that vibe, that we are hiring as fast as we can and getting great people in and seeing how fast we can move. This is all thrilling for me as the growth lead, as the head of growth at Kraken. it's something that I live for this moment.
It's great. Congratulations on that. And I guess let me ask you this: where do you see the next leg of disruption? I feel like this is the internet where, social media is only around 10 years old, right? I mean, it's just, first it was AOL just getting online, but every single industry has been disrupted by the internet and continues to be with 5G, quantum computing, AI, it just continues. And I feel like it's the same thing we're going to see with blockchain and crypto, but, we had DeFi started, 2019, it's 2020 and, still exploding trend. NFTs exploding now. Is it security tokens? We launched our security token first ever called Curzio Equity Owners, first to give an equity stake, pay dividend, trade in the foreign exchange available to retail investors. But do you see that market, or is there something else that you maybe see that could be the next disruption? Or again, that's always difficult to see, right?
Yeah, I mean that's what's tricky about crypto is that the ebb and flow of narratives or what's hot is really intense. There's kind of a core narrative of Bitcoin, Gold 2.0 store of value, and that drives a majority of the volume in the space. If you look at the trading volume of Bitcoin pairs and Ethereum pairs, those are huge. So, I think with DeFi, that's a pretty strong narrative. Same with NFTs. NFTs have kind of quickly come and go in terms of narrative path. That's par for the course for crypto. So yeah, I think DeFi in the space has gotten a lot of interest. My own personal feelings are that I'm really interested in Bitcoin and its promise for being Gold 2.0, but certainly others in this space I think are in Kraken itself is interested in the DeFi space and very much leaning into that.
And that was going to lead to my next question. You are fully engulfed in Bitcoin, and a lot of my good contacts love that, and because they see there's a lot of crap out there. But are there any other projects that interest you? And you kind of answered that, but I wasn't too sure if there's anything else, or if it's Ethereum, high gas fees people talk about, but that's an all-time high. But is there anything out there outside of Bitcoin that you like? And if you say no, that's perfectly fine, because I know you are 100% pure Bitcoin guy.
Yeah, look, I mean, along my journey, I tried out a lot of other things. Like I did some mining of altcoins before, and I've traded other altcoins and thought about other altcoins, and even thought about creating an altcoin. I think most Bitcoiners you meet, folks that are just into Bitcoin, they didn't just land on like I'm just going to do Bitcoin. They typically tried a lot of other things. They tried a lot of other things, and then they're like, you know what? There's reasons why Bitcoin is really good at what it does. Blockchain technology was built to first build Bitcoin, and blockchain technology is not a general purpose tool. It can't be we can't just take out this or that. If you take out one element, you sort of disrupt the entirety of how it works. And that's where, with Bitcoin solves the problem of trust with money very, very elegantly. And when you try to repurpose it for other things, it's a really tricky operation because the design surface area is very narrow. I'm always a fan of new innovative ideas. So I encourage, I'm very excited to see people try different things. They're free to. But for me and what I like, for me, I've been around 8 years in crypto. I've seen 10,000 cryptocurrencies come and go.
Makes you a dinosaur.
Yeah, I've seen 10,000 come and go. And so for me, even if I wasn't really into, like, let's say I was agnostic and I didn't really like Bitcoin for its future of, I think solving the problem of trust with governments, which I think is essential for human freedom. Let's say I didn't care about that and I was just like a trader. Bitcoin's return per unit of risk is still the most phenomenal asset in the space. Can you pick another altcoin that will outperform Bitcoin? Certainly possible, but many don't. And Bitcoin, the whole world is waking up to Bitcoin's value and why Bitcoin is Gold 2.0. And I think it would be kind of crazy to miss out on that moment to, chase potentially higher gains somewhere else. So again, fully supportive of people trading what they want and people creating what they want and trying out new things. Just on a personal level, like that's how I think about it from a purely like economic perspective of the return per unit of risk of Bitcoin is the best in the space. And, also I've got a very emotional component where I do believe Bitcoin is our greatest chance at freedom. And I think that Bitcoin starts a movement where if we remove power of money from states, then that changes everything else. All the other things start to flow down where we can start to challenge every other part of control over our lives. So for me, it's a very emotional sort of, I guess you could say like freedom patriotic, like a freedom fighter sort of perspective.
So that leads to this question, which is going to be the easiest, which means it's going to be the hardest. So do you still own most of your Bitcoin? Have you taken profits in it? And how big do you think this could get? Do you see Bitcoin going much higher from here, or do you say 100,000 is definitely in reach, or is it, again, it's always hard to discuss prices, but I'm just curious to see if how bullish you are, even though your thesis has been playing out perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, look, no one's a perfect hodler in the beginning. I traded back and forth, but I haven't really disposed of any Bitcoin in a long, long time. My original investment thesis was that Bitcoin is gold 2.0. At a 1.1 trillion market cap, Bitcoin is just now barely touching upon that premise. Gold is worth 10 trillion,
10 trillion.
and that's just one store of value asset. So, and Bitcoin has far superior traits as a money or store of value asset. For example, like no one can audit the supply of gold. With my home computer, I can audit the entire supply of Bitcoin instantaneously. That sort of assurance and transparency makes Bitcoin, I think, incredibly more valuable than gold. So, do I think Bitcoin has a lot more upside? Absolutely. We are just now seeing institutions dip their toe in. Ownership of Bitcoin in the United States is like 5 to 10%. It's still very small. With COVID, money printer went burr at a rate that I don't think anyone expected. Bitcoin is an antidote to poor central banking policy, especially money printing, unfettered money printing. So Bitcoin has never been in a better moment to own it. This is the moment that you want protection from inflation. This is a moment where, as institutions buy it and as it's being legitimized, more people develop trust in it. Therefore, they park more value in it, and then the price goes higher. So I'm hodling. I don't think things have even gotten exciting yet. Bitcoin's at $63,000 a Bitcoin at this moment. I've been hodling since it was $10 a Bitcoin, and
that's great.
And
that's amazing.
I don't even think things have gotten crazy. I mean, in this cycle, I would fully expect us to go from anywhere between $200,000 a Bitcoin to $1 million a Bitcoin. It depends on how intense it is, but certainly this time is different. This time is very different than the other cycles, which were during a macro bull run. The markets were relatively good when Bitcoin was nothing was breaking. No one was scared when Bitcoin was growing from 2000, post 2008 through to 2020, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden people go, wait a second, this Bitcoin thing kind of makes sense. In these previous market cycles, it was just all retail speculating on Bitcoin, and the infrastructure was shaky, and there weren't even like options, like there's just spot trading. There's spot and futures trading, and options trading just became popular like a year ago. So Bitcoin's very early in its adoption and very early in its institutionalization. So I couldn't be more bullish on Bitcoin, but I am the Bitcoin bull. So I don't think that's too big of a surprise there.
No big surprise there, and you've been right all along. So congrats on that, and definitely worth it for you being in so early. But let's transition here, because you have a great newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter called the Dan Held Report, where it seems it's more about educating the masses about Bitcoin, its future potential. Could you talk a little bit about that, and if somebody wants to sign up for it, because I think you have 170,000 people there, at least followers on your Twitter. But how can people find it? How could they sign up, and maybe talk a little bit about that newsletter?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing it up. The Held Report is a weekly newsletter that I put out to paid subscribers. I walk through different topics in Bitcoin. For example, this last week I covered crypto IPOs. So what happened? What's happening with the Coinbase IPO? What does that mean for the rest of crypto companies? And what does that mean for Bitcoin? So that's an example of a topic that I'd write about. Or can governments kill Bitcoin? I wrote an article about how could a government kill Bitcoin and how can Bitcoin defend against that? And so yeah, it's essentially a weekly report where if you want to know the intimate details of how Bitcoin works and have it explained simply to you, this is the newsletter for you. I've been in the space 8 years, as mentioned before, as Frank mentioned before, worked at 5 crypto companies, sold 2. I've seen a lot come and go. And so this is sort of my place to give you my intimate thoughts, and I'm pretty forward with how I feel. So I give you kind of a very forward opinion about how I feel about different topics in Bitcoin.
And how could they find that? Is it a website or?
Yeah, check it. Just Google Dan Held or the Held Report, and it'll be the #1 search result. And then if you want more of my kind of quick hit thoughts, like if the market starts moving fast, I'm not here to give you signals on pricing. I'm a hodler. I bought Bitcoin and I've held. I don't day trade it. I just hodl it. So I'd recommend following other folks for some of the day-to-day price action. But if you want to, Twitter is where I'm really, really active. If you tweet at me, I might reply. And so I'm Dan Held on Twitter. So it's at Dan Held.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Well, Dan, listen, I want to thank you for coming on with the Coinbase IPO tomorrow, and this is going to be broadcasted tomorrow. It's just the timing is great to give us a lot of details on that, and the entire industry, right? Everyone's trying to get more and more familiar with it. Again, you've been in it for 8 years and benefited tremendously, but I know how busy you are. I appreciate the time, and hopefully you join us again soon.
Thanks, Frank. And I just want to encourage everyone, spend some time thinking about Bitcoin. If you're skeptical now, just spend a few minutes to read about it a little bit more. You're not going to get it the first time, but give it some time. You owe it to yourself to know more about it. You owe it to yourself to at least learn it. If you learn about it and you still don't like it, that's great. But take the time to learn a little bit more, because this will be one of the greatest revolutions in history.
Yeah, and Dan, that makes a lot of sense because you're seeing even the Ray Dalios and a lot of hedge fund managers who really hated it probably about 3-4 years ago, even longer, are starting to adopt it, right? I think they're starting to get it a little bit more, and they admitted that. So that's great advice. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, hopefully you join us again soon, man.
Thanks, Frank. Cheers.